Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and we are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through your life and with your relationship with Christ. We've been in a series on being countercultural in a secular world, and today I welcome a very special guest who not only loves Jesus, but recently broke the mold and went against cultural norms by having a home birth for her first baby. Haden is now a home birth enthusiast and is all about instinctual motherhood. And her sweet family lives in Midland, Texas, and she is loving life as a stay at home mom. You can find her on Instagram at Haden, Haden dot Lee, Lee dot Johnson. Haden, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So you and I both have a mutual friend, and that is Audrey at A
Mhm.
Joyful Birth. And so, for folks that have been listening to the show for a while, or if you're new here, scroll back like 50 episodes, and she was on. But I really just want to go ahead and jump in and start with, can you share a little bit about you? Who are you and where are you from? And tell us all the things.
I am from Stephenville, Texas. I was born in Spokane, Washington, though. My mom is from Washington. My dad's from Texas. Um, they met and dated for about 7 years, had me, and then decided that Texas was where they were going to call home. I went to college for a little bit and then kind of decided it wasn't for me, dropped out. And then I never even knew that you could have a home birth. And that was just something that was never in my vision. It was never something I wanted to do. Um, and then as of very recently, like I'll be honest, probably a year ago, I decided that that was something I'd want to do if the Lord did bless my husband and I to have a baby. And I also felt like as my faith grew in Jesus, my faith in the human body also grew among so many other things beyond birth, even. Um, so yeah, and then just a lot of preparation, research beforehand. It was a very easy decision for me to make to have my first baby at home. And then I also have a family member that really pushed me in the counterculture direction um, when she kind of started telling me because I was on birth control and I wanted to kind of get off of it, not for any purpose other than I'm married.
Mhm.
And she just kind of told me like how bad it was for you and the damage you can do to your body and how it spiritually isn't even good for your soul.
Mm.
And I said, whoa, sent me down a rabbit hole. And then I gave birth in my bathtub.
I love it. I love the jump. And I love
Yes.
that you had people in your life that were speaking these truths to you because
Mhm.
sometimes that's where I feel like, and that's why this show exists and other podcasts like it,
Mhm.
is to raise awareness about
Yeah.
things or to talk about things that maybe are not talked about enough or in a truthful and real way. And I love
Mhm.
that you pointed out that there is a spiritual aspect when we're taking birth control
Oh, yes,
because,
absolutely.
you'll hear, well, everything has side effects, but what about our soul? What
Yes, what
about,
soul.
yeah, what about that side of, if we're suppressing a piece of our bodies, a portion of ourselves on birth control, what is that doing for our greater spiritual self?
And celebrating it at the same time too, not having a menstrual cycle and having all the negative side effects that go with it, the
Mhm,
celebration of that. And it's like, no, your menstrual cycle is something that's beautiful and it
mhm.
means you're a healthy young woman. And instead it's derogatory and dirty and, oh, you don't want to have one. And I understand they can be like not fun, but in the same breath it's that's what your body is meant to do. It was created to do that and you're suppressing it.
Isn't it amazing? I love that you're using the word suppress here because it's accurate. But isn't it amazing how modern medicine is all about the suppression of the human body and how our
Mhm.
human bodies were made to be like I mentioned to you before we started, I have a little bit of a cough still. My
Mhm.
cough is my body expelling what it needs to expel. But what
Yes.
does pharma want to do? Suppress it with a cough suppressant, with
Hmm.
cough drops that suppress it.
Hmm.
Everything is about suppressing the symptom rather than allowing the body to heal and to go through it.
It's
Same thing
also
with birth
about,
control, right?
yes, it's also about escaping discomfort too,
Mm,
which is very, very heavy in our society. Nobody wants to have discomfort. Nobody wants to sit in it. Nobody wants to learn from it, grow from it, or even just allow our bodies to go through the process of being sick or allow our bodies to go through the process of pregnancy. And it breaks my heart to see so many women wanting to induce labor at 36, 37 weeks because they're uncomfortable. And it's like,
yeah.
no, don't do that.
You're bringing up such an important point. It's amazing because it could just be a few more days for some
Hmm.
people or
Yep.
another week or 2 weeks. And it's like, we can't sacrifice a week or two of discomfort to ensure that not only our baby has a good experience, but that we don't experience birth trauma
Hmm.
going through something that we didn't need to go through. But you're right.
Yes.
So much of the birth system inside the hospital is about convenience, is about comfort, is about let's put us in the best, most comfortable, pain-free, so to speak, air quotes,
Yes.
position possible. But I want to back up for a second because, we're talking about countercultural stuff. And in some ways it's weird for me to say, which I'm sure it is for you now too, to say like this is countercultural because to me, home birth and avoiding pharmaceuticals is very normal. It's not
Yes.
weird to me, but it's
Yes.
viewed as against the grain to society.
Yes.
And home birth, it's taboo for a lot of people. They are like, oh my gosh, home birth is so dangerous. But
Mm-hmm.
God designed our bodies to give birth, like you said. He
Hmm.
designed our bodies to have periods and to menstruate and to go
Hmm.
through that cycle. And when we
Hmm.
don't go through it and when we force ourselves to be suppressed by birth control, we cause damage to it. I mean, birth control is a class one carcinogen. So,
Hmm.
that's something for us to really consider there. Anyway, let's let's talk a little bit about how you got there because you were our first time mom that home birth, and that is not that common. It
Hmm.
happens, obviously,
Yes.
but what was the thing? Was there a one thing that was like, I've seen what I needed to see in the hospital, these
Hmm.
moms kind of thing? Was it a moment or was it gradual and this kind of thing that you're like, you know what? I'm staying home. I'm not doing that whole thing.
It was gradual and then all of a sudden, if that makes any sense at all. It was very gradual and then it was like a absolutely that I would not do it any other way.
Mhm.
Um I kind of like grew up in the hospital system, I guess you could say, from me just being sick as a child and then realizing as I kind of went on my journey there were so many things that were never brought into question when I was sick as a child and I was having these fainting spells and I just was never well. I was never once asked what my diet was like. I was never once asked how are you sleeping? What kind of stress levels did you have? And looking back, stress was very very clearly a reason why I was sick. And I was never even asked that. It
Interesting.
was just immediate medication. So that
Mm.
also, and then having family members getting diagnosed with cancer and then seeing them go through that long, drawn out process of being in the hospital system and being in and out of hospitals and visiting them and them coming home and sadly having to say goodbye to them. Um, that also just kind of tainted my faith in what I thought of the hospital system.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that anything was wrong about either of those situations. It was just me kind of learning and growing in myself and then looking back and being like, that's kind of weird. And also my family member, she had a home birth and then she also had a free birth as well. And seeing her go through her absolutely beautiful journey, and I look up to her so much, and her kind of cracking the door for me with, why don't you look at how bad birth control is for you? I went on a spiral. And whenever my husband and I very first decided that we wanted to try for a baby, we took about 6 months beforehand to prepare. Me, it was physically making sure I'm eating really good, and then educating myself, being informed on everything, trying to figure out what I envisioned for my birth and how I needed to execute that. And what I kind of did was I started at the very far end of the spectrum, which is free birthing. And I worked my way back and then found where I would be most comfortable. And then that was what I decided to do. And my husband, he made sure that he ate healthy. He worked out a bunch. He was right there along with me, listening to positive birth stories and deconstructing the idea of birth in the media and things like that. So whenever we decided to get pregnant, I was fully informed. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. And yeah, it wasn't like an aha moment. It was gradual. And then all of a sudden.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And it sounds like a lot of pieces to this, right? Because we've talked on the podcast a little bit about conditioning, mental conditioning and programming, I guess you could call it.
Yes.
Where we grow up and we're programmed to believe or think a certain way. Like about the medical system, as you mentioned, when you grow up in the medical system, you often feel like that's the place to go. Those are the experts that you go to. And then as you get older and you see the disservice that it does to a lot of people, I think that's the first kind of like crack in the screen, it's the first crack in it. You're like, wait a second. I've gone through this with my own mother-in-law who she had a stroke and went to the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her.
No.
And a couple weeks later, she was having stroke symptoms again, very sick, went to a different hospital. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. My cousin happens to be a doctor, and we pulled her results from both hospitals and sent them to her. And she said, she's having strokes. Why are they not recognizing this? It's in their own paperwork. It's in their own tests right here. So we ended up taking her to a stroke hospital, and it turns out she had dozens of strokes.
Oh, bless
And
her heart.
it's just one of those examples that so many people I know go to the medical system for help and don't get it, even when they're seeking specific help for specific things.
Especially women. And it's always so crazy to me how any woman off the street, you pull them and say, what's women's health care like? And it's horrible. But home birth is dangerous. And I don't agree with that. But I don't trust the medical system. Or I had endometriosis and PCOS, and they would not diagnose me with either of those. Or they said that those are like not even real diagnoses. And it's always crazy to me how a woman can acknowledge that and say women within the medical system are abused so often. We're dramatic. We're making it up. It's all in our heads. Well, are you sleeping enough? Well, any of these factors that just like write women off. But as soon as we get pregnant, very, very quickly are we to turn our bodies over entirely to the medical system. So I feel like there's a disconnect right there that you are doing an amazing job at highlighting and saying, hey, there are other options for women with their healthcare, especially during pregnancy and labor and delivery and postpartum even.
Absolutely. Hey, I was one of those women, and you'll love this story. I had an IUD and when I was younger, and I was having suicidal ideation where I was just fantasizing about killing myself. It didn't make any sense because that's not how I am at all. Never have been. I'm like, this is so weird. This is not me. And I knew it was from the IUD. It was the hormonal Mirena IUD. And I went to get it out First, OB couldn't get it out, and she didn't have a ultrasound machine, so she couldn't see what she was doing. So I called my insurance and I was like, this thing needs to come out today. Can you help me find a practice that can see me today that has an ultrasound machine? They found one. So I go to this place and it's a male OBGYN.
Mm.
And I tell him what's going on. And this is where the gaslighting that you're mentioning comes in. He says, oh, you don't need to get your IUD out. You just need to be on an antidepressant.
There you go. Conveyor
I,
belt.
I could have slapped this guy. I was like, excuse me, sir, but no, I need to get it out. He did attempt to get it out and couldn't because guess what? It was embedded to my uterine wall. So
Mm.
had to have it surgically removed. And yeah, so like worst case scenario, right? But I
Yeah.
want to tell you, I was a different person within one, like I got it out on a Friday. Saturday
Huh?
comes by. My husband is like, you're different. You're calmer. And just the way that I felt, it was like a weight was lifted off of me. My
Mm-hmm.
anxiety that I had felt from this thing went away. I never
Mm-hmm.
had thoughts like that ever again. And it's so frustrating to me that doctors will say things like that, try to cover a problem from a medication with another medication that will also cause problems. And
Yes.
antidepressants and antipsychotics can also make you way worse
Mm-hmm.
and have even bigger issues.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other thing I want to address here is the women to women part of this, woman to woman, that whenever this conversation, I'll give this my story as an example, comes up within a group of women, there is a resistance to it oftentimes. And I know it's a defense mechanism because women don't want to think about the idea of birth control being taken away from them. It's
Yes.
too hard to think about what life would be like without birth control. It's like you have to shatter an idea. You're shattering the programming around birth control, or you're trying to, by
Mm-hmm.
even suggesting that it could cause a problem when anyone could look at an insert for any birth control and see the side effects are a mile long. And so they'll
Yes.
say things like, well, I was fine. I had it for 5 years and never had a problem.
And I was one of those women.
So you know.
I yes, no, I do. I was on Nexplanon, the bar in your arm. I got
Okay.
put on it when I was 18 because I had ovarian cysts. not
Interesting.
not it, not any question of, well, let's check your hormone levels. Just, oh,
Oh
you
yeah.
have ovarian cysts. Here's birth
Mhm.
control. No like immediately, and I didn't know any better. I was just like, okay. Didn't have a problem with it for years and years and years. Turn around, my husband and I just got engaged, and I kind of started thinking about maybe getting it removed, but was still like, we'll wait until after we're married, whatever. And I went in to go have it replaced, and I was like, if I want to get it removed in a couple months, I can, because the time to get it replaced was up.
Mhm.
I got it replaced, and I tell you, within a week, I was exactly like you.
Mm.
I was in a completely different, and the reason why I didn't think it was, I thought it's the stress of planning a wedding. I just got
Mhm.
engaged, so many life changes. I'm moving all the way to Midland. Like,
Yep.
that's kind of what I thought it was for the longest time. I say longest time, it was maybe a month because that's how bad it got very quickly.
Mhm.
And my husband, one day, very, very bravely, sat me down and said, I think it's your birth control.
Mm.
Wanted to slap him because how dare you?
Yeah,
How
how
dare
dare you? You can't take this away from me.
I was like, how dare you, first of all, tell me that I'm hormonal? Crazy. He was absolutely correct, because when I went back to go get it removed less than a month later, turns out it was a completely different drug he had put in my arm.
Oh, wow.
They changed the hormonal levels of it, so
Mm.
my body reacted negatively to it extensively. So as I'm sitting
Mm.
there in the room about to get it removed, just now hearing, oh, well, it's because it's a completely different hormonal level and it's a completely different drug.
Mhm.
I was disgusted. I felt so betrayed. And this is an OB, and it was a male. This was an OB that I actually really loved. I liked him. But after that, and then also finding out that with Nexplanon, you can actually have an egg get fertilized. Did not know that. Was
Mm,
not told that. I would have
mm,
chosen a different birth control even at the age of 18 if I would have known that.
mhm,
And so I lost all my trust right then and there. And that's
mhm.
what sent me on my spiral also.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Went through the same experience with having an IUD too. It was
Mm-hmm.
something that I didn't realize or understand fully until later. That same thing that you can have an egg fertilize and go into your uterus, and with the copper IUD in particular, it makes your uterus unhospitable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how gross is that? It
Yeah.
creates an hospitable environment that can literally tear the embryo apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me feel I went through a lot of just feeling very sad
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
guilty almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
process that, right? Like, because you don't know better
Yes.
necessarily until you do. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about this, because
Yes.
now everybody
Right.
knows. Right here, right now. Now you know. Uh, heard it here. But it is
Yes.
important for us to have these conversations, because anything that we put in our body that's foreign, that is not of God, that is not of the Lord, that He didn't create,
Mm-hmm.
we are changing our bodies. We're changing the chemistry of our bodies. We're changing the way that our bodies work and function.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just something that I think we all need to talk about and think about. And anyway, I'm super proud of you for you just going down these paths and choosing what you feel God chose best for you too, to say, I'm not messing with this birth control stuff anymore. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
trust the Lord, and I'm sure there's other there's other factors and other things that we can do, right? We actually have a
Yes.
whole series on fertility awareness method that,
Yes.
for those listening that are scared about the whole birth control thing, I can't not be on birth control.
Yeah.
Well, there are other options, if you
Yeah, and my husband and I did those other options and they worked perfectly. And
Mhm.
the moment, without being too, I guess you can't be too TMI, but without being too TMI, like the moment we decided to try, I got pregnant because that's how accurate it can be. And
Yes.
it worked for
Yes.
us for 2 years on,
Mhm.
we weren't ready to have a baby, so we didn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny when I went to the OB to actually I ended up getting a second IUD, if you can believe that. And when I
Oh,
went to finally have it removed, I know I got the copper one next, and then I had even more problems. So anyway, it's a story for another day. Well,
okay.
actually, I already shared the story on this podcast, so we'll just scroll back.
Okay.
Um, you know what he said to me? He goes, "So what are you gonna do? You're not gonna, you're taking this IUD out. You're not gonna go on the pill or anything. What are you gonna do?" And first of all, why do I have to answer that question to you, guy? But
Yeah.
second of
Why do
all,
you care?
we said, we're gonna follow fertility awareness method. And he said, "Oh, you know what we call that? Parents." And I was like, okay. And
That's gross.
gross, right? And same thing. We followed fam and didn't have a baby
Mhm,
for a year, whatever it was. And then when we decided that we wanted to get pregnant, I had understood how my cycle worked and
mhm,
understood those fertility windows. And that's the thing that's really awesome about it.
mhm,
And I know that a lot of folks are worried about, well, I have an irregular cycle and things of that nature. I'd encourage them to go down the route of looking into their diet, looking following an anti-inflammatory diet,
mhm,
something of that nature, because that can help get your hormones back on track. Our world is so full of toxins. I was just
mhm,
watching a video today about how Tampax put all these parabens and paraffins into their tampons in 2020, and
mhm,
now the ingredient composition is different than it used to be 10 years ago, let's say.
mm.
And women are sticking those up their hoo-ha. And Of course, they're going to influence your hormones. And of course, they're going to change and shift the way that our bodies work. And that's just one product. That's
Mm-hmm.
not body wash and shampoos and lotions and all these things, perfumes, all of these endocrine disruptors and things that we use in and on our bodies that can
Mm-hmm.
influence fertility, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So let's get back to home birth for a second
Okay.
or for a while, however long you want to go, because I want to hear more about you made the decision to have a home birth. Did you get nervous as you were getting closer to your date? When did you end up having your baby? Did you have a guest date or, due date or whatever, however you wanted to label it? Were you looking at that? Was it something you were thinking about? Walk us
I
through.
I was not, so I had no anxiety at all. As soon as I got pregnant, I had no anxiety, I had no fear, and I had what I called like a very, I guess, cocky, where I was like, I'm so excited for labor. I can't wait to experience it. And just the outlook on it. Like, I was so excited to give birth. I was so excited to go into labor. And I honestly think that just my faith and knowing that this is what I was designed to do, and then also just understanding physiological birth at such a deep level and understanding also contributes to the peace I felt too. And I was still humbled though. That's not to say I was not humbled during labor. I absolutely was. I was having contractions and was thinking I had back labor also the entire
Okay.
time. I don't think I had one contraction in my belly at all.
Oh no. Was
I
he
was
sunny side up?
he was sitting on the opposite side that he was supposed to, so he
Okay.
had to rotate all the way down, and
Yeah.
I
Okay.
yeah, so he had to rotate all the way around and then decided to come out.
That's
But
usually what happens with back labor, right? Is babies
mhm,
just has to make their spinning
yes,
out to the world.
yes, and I did the whole spinning babies thing for months because he did not leave that side of my belly. I don't think he was ever on my left side once. He was
Mm.
just on that
He was where
side.
he was comfortable.
Yeah, favorite side of the bed, I guess. Um,
Yeah,
and
right?
he, but yeah, I mean, he was good to me during pregnancy, though. I had a very easy pregnancy. I loved being pregnant, until I would have to get up off the couch at 40 weeks. But,
No
um,
morning sickness or anything like that?
I had a little bit of morning sickness, but it wasn't anything I couldn't manage.
Mhm.
Making sure I'm eating enough protein first thing in the morning, ginger candy, bone broth, still keep exercising. I would take if I would get really nauseous, I would take a cold shower, and that would help. Also,
Mm.
per my husband's recommendations, he loves telling me anytime I have anything wrong with me, he's like, "Take a cold shower." Okay. Uh,
That's his global advice. I love it.
yes,
Did
it
you
is.
follow a specific pregnancy diet like Real Food for Pregnancy or Brewer's Diet or anything like that?
I kind of did a version of the brewer's diet, and I did
Mhm.
read real food for pregnancy, and I didn't really try and like stick to one thing. I just made sure that I was always eating whole nutrient dense foods. I didn't
Mhm.
prioritize one thing over another. I was eating my prenatal, I guess is what you could call it.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots of eggs, lots of milk, lots of red meat, lots of smoked oysters, pearl powder. Um, I'm trying to think of what the creator's name is. Noelle on Instagram. I can't think of her handle right now, but I absolutely love her and the Freely Rooted podcast. She has a full episode on there about prenatal diet, and I just kind of took that and ran with it. Also,
Mhm.
she's the one that recommended the smoked oysters and stuff.
Okay.
Nasty, but I did it.
I was gonna say oyster is good for you. I don't know if I could do it.
And but yeah, I didn't really follow like a specific diet, I would say, other than just avoiding junk, avoiding ultra processed foods, and avoiding a little too much sugar. I noticed during my first trimester, if I would eat a little too much sugar, it would always make me nauseous.
Mm.
So avoiding sugar also. But other than that, just listening to my body and eating what it was telling me to eat.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So you got to 40 weeks, and then what happens next?
I got to 40 weeks and I kind of had to mentally prepare myself that, okay, my midwives are going to start talking about induction. I had to kind of mentally prep myself for that. Went in for my 40-week appointment, and yeah, they did say, they were like, well, 42 weeks is when we can't take care of you anymore. And I talked to my husband about it, and we kind of decided that if it does reach that point, and if I'm okay, and if baby's okay, we're gonna still do a home birth. We talked about it, agreed to it. Thankfully, did not have to do that. I had him exactly on 41 weeks. Um, I didn't really try, and I still was not searching for labor. I still was not trying to force labor. I wasn't doing any craziness. Uh, my husband was looking up different things to do, and we had what did we call it? A serotonin day. We had a serotonin day, and he took me and we got pedicures together. We watched my favorite movies. I think I ate my favorite food, which is pho. I love pho. And he just kind of made like a day for me, serotonin day. And then the next day, I had my first contraction while eating lunch with my family.
Wow. Wow.
And
Serotonin day worked. Look at that.
it
I love
worked.
it.
That is what I recommend to every mom. I'm like, if you're reaching that point and you're kind of getting nervous about your guest state or whatever, the worst thing you can do is stress. The worst thing you
Mhm.
can do is put pressure on yourself. The worst thing you can do is restrict yourself and have that mentality of what if. It's take it step by step, take it day by day, and just really focus on yourself and being happy, especially with you and your husband. One of my most fondest moments of my husband and I are those last few days leading up to going into labor, because those were the last few days that it was just him and I, and we really did a lot to cherish those and
Yeah.
make new memories together and just spend really good quality time together also. So, because I mean, the birth is what you have to completely surrender yourself to it. You can't control it. It's not your job to put yourself into labor. Your body will do what it's meant to do. And that's the mindset I had. And I had him at exactly 41 weeks.
I love that. And it is very true that if we are under pressure or stress or there's outside factors, it can prevent us from going into labor. I had a
Mm-hmm.
doula during my first home birth
Mm-hmm.
who she shared with me 2 out of her 4 labors. So I think it was like numbers 2 and 3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She actually went into labor when her and her husband went to stay alone together
Mm-hmm.
at a hotel. Like she was away from her other children, and it was just her being with her other children, taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
Her body and her mind was focused on that, and she couldn't relax.
Yes.
And once she went on this, staycation in town, whatever, with her husband for a night, she went into labor. Twice that happened to her. And I thought that that was really funny. Now,
Yeah.
I have not had that issue, thankfully. I've gone into labor with all my kids being here. But I noticed that for myself, I always have a lot of tasks. I get very nesty. And
Mm-hmm.
when I complete the list is like when my body's like, all right, you can go into labor now. Your list is done. So I've made my list shorter with every pregnancy, just so we're not waiting around.
uh, I got so nesty too. My poor husband, he was putting together so many different things for me and helping me check things off my to-do list. Like
Oh yeah.
I'm cleaning the baseboards. Like we got to make a good first impression. Like
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And the nesting pregnancy hormones are so weird too because it's not
Mhm.
always stuff that makes sense.
Yep.
It's like I got to clean out this drawer that I've never cleaned out in 10 years that's not significant or important in any way to this birth of this baby. but that's just how it is. I had 2 long lists, double-sided. And
Mm.
I start early, girl. I'm like at 4 months. Well, here's my list of things I need to do. And it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I don't know why I'm this way.
I wish I started that early. I waited right up until that last minute and said, okay, so I need to do everything.
You
And if
know,
I
we all have our things and our ways of working, but now you
mm,
can start your list early.
yes.
But my sister always jokes. She's like, I wish I had your nesting energy, not pregnant, because then I could actually get things done. And I said, I wish I had my nesting energy, not pregnant too. But
Yes.
all right, so you got to 41 weeks and then you're out to lunch, you have your first contraction. Did you feel
Mhm.
like, and this is the thing that's so fun about hearing birth stories when it's the first time, is like, did you know you were in labor? Did you know that it was happening, or were you like, I don't know if this is it?
I think I just heard my husband chuckle in the background because I did not believe I was in labor until I was probably 7, 8 centimeters dilated. Like I was
Okay.
having consistent contractions. I The reason why I did not think I was in labor is because I did not feel it in my stomach. I only felt them in my
Ah,
back.
yes.
And I also had never given birth before. So I'm
Sure,
like,
there's that.
okay, so as soon as my contractions done, I'm like totally fine. Like
Mhm.
I'm chatting, I'm sitting here, like I feel normal. And then I would have another one and then be normal again. And I was like, I don't know about that. And that's the one thing that no amount of preparation, watching home birth videos, listening to birth stories prepared me for is how true labor actually goes. So like you can
Mhm.
watch it, but when I was going through it, I'm like, that's not what I'm going through. I didn't It didn't make sense in my head that that's also what's happening to me right now. So I think my doula and my midwife showed up at the same time, and I told my husband I wanted my doula there a little bit early, but it didn't happen because my contractions went from 5 minutes apart to a minute apart very quickly.
Okay.
And I don't even remember my doula or my midwife coming to the getting here. I don't even remember them arriving. That's how far gone I was.
Mhm.
And I was in birthing La La Land. And uh but yeah, I just gaslighted myself aggressively that I'm not in labor. And it's also the which I'm working on it, the aggressive people pleaser in me and the overwhelming need to not be an inconvenience. I was so terrified of telling my midwife or my doula to come to the house and then me actually not be in labor.
Mhm.
That was a horrible fear of mine. I would
Mhm.
have felt so bad for wasting their time doing that. So that also contributed to the reason why it took until my husband was like, I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm just going to call them.
I think that's a pretty common thing, and that's a good call out because that is
Mhm,
something that a lot of women worry about
mhm,
when they're having a baby, and whether it's the first time or not, is
mhm.
am I really in labor? Is this really happening? But I also do think that there isn't a need for anybody else to be there because you're doing your thing. So
Exactly.
it's okay to wait. It's cool to wait. And
Mhm.
for those home birthing, you're pretty prepared no matter what, right? Like
Yeah.
there's always going to be the potential that you're going to have the baby before the midwife comes.
Oh,
And
yes,
so
absolutely.
that's something
That
that's
baby's coming
like,
no matter what.
yeah, so you're ready for that. So,
Yes. It
that's
was fun.
awesome.
I didn't initially plan, which looking back, I am so glad I did hire a doula. I initially hired her in my mind to help my husband
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
he just kept asking me, I might butcher her last name, but Emily Saldea with the Free Birth Society.
Okay.
Brody, we watched her uh, podcast episode over how your partner can assist you in your free birth.
Mhm.
And we watched it together, and he still was like, I'm still so nervous. I still like, I have so much anxiety. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, we'll hire a doula that can, when I'm in labor doing all the things, she can help you to help me, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
She was phenomenal. I absolutely loved my doula. She was amazing. I could not have handled my birth and my delivery as well as I did without her. She was incredible. And but yeah, looking back, I got her for him, and then she ended up being everything I needed and more.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. It sounds like she really supported you, was probably very encouraging. I don't know
Yes.
if she was helping with positions or counter pressure or anything like that, but that can be really helpful too.
Yes, she was. She was doing all the things, and then she also helped me for my breastfeeding journey too. And I'm also convinced breastfeeding for me has been very, very easy. The Lord has blessed me incredibly in that department. I have not had any trouble with it at all. But she also set me up for success with that also.
Mhm.
So I
That's
really
awesome.
appreciate that. That's the one thing I will always tell soon to be moms that want to breastfeed is take a lactation course,
Mm.
because there's so much out there that you don't know about. And it breaks my heart to hear breastfeeding journeys end simply because they don't know and simply because
Mhm.
they don't have the support. And it makes me so sad. So that is one thing. Find a IBCLC and go through that process with them, because they will set you up for
Absolutely.
success.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely agree.
Most of them.
True. Yes. We had an IBCLC on the show. Man, I wish I knew these episodes off the top of my head, but I don't. Um, her name is Sarah, and she gave some really great advice and then also some information on ties and what to look for and things of that nature, because
Mhm.
that is why a lot of moms can struggle. I actually have had ties in all my kids and still had breastfed and been fortunate enough to not
Mhm.
struggle to breastfeed. I did have pain with my first, but I thought that was normal at the
Yes.
time. And then by the time like the couple weeks went by, it was over. And I never
Mhm.
had an issue ever since. So I'm in the
Mhm.
same boat with you that breastfeeding has been a very positive and good journey.
Mhm.
I do think that it's important for moms to seek that education and help and look into things that can never hurt, to
Mhm.
just get educated. But, the big thing too is not to hold too much stress or fear. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that a lot of moms think that they need to be pumping bottles of milk when a baby's
Oh.
born. And like they need a pinky fingernail size
Mhm.
of milk the first week when
Yes.
they're feeding. They don't need all of this milk. And that's something that I see a lot in these mom groups I'm in is I'm not producing enough. My
Well,
milk hasn't come in. And it's like your body is
I'm not
doing what it needs to do.
Yes, exactly. And pumping also is not a good indicator of what your supply is at all.
100%.
And I
Hmm.
see so many moms say, "Oh, I'm only pumping like this much milk. I have like low supply. I need to
Yeah.
supplement with formula."
Yep.
No, you don't. Like what you're pumping is not accurate of how much your baby is receiving.
Hmm.
And if there is latch issues or anything like that, you can find resources and help for that as well.
Yeah.
But another thing that just is the belief that there's so many things within the birthing world and just motherhood in general of things that are marketed as a have to do, you must do, that you do not have to do. You don't have to pump. Nobody has to keep, like, not every single mom has to pump in order to keep a supply up. Now, there are nuances for absolutely everything,
Yeah.
but a mom that is able to breastfeed normally does not need to pump. And
Yep.
pumping can also cause so many issues in the long run, also, especially if you're not doing it correctly or have the support of a IBCLC to educate you on when and how to do it if that is something that you want or need to do.
Hmm.
But the belief that, oh, you absolutely have to pump. No, you don't. You don't
Nope.
have to put that much additional stress on yourself. You don't have to give your baby a bottle. You don't have to do anything. The
Mhm.
only thing you have to do is listen to yourself. The only thing your baby needs is you.
That's right. Preach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Something that I learned that I didn't know going into my first baby nursing experience was that the milk changes throughout the day. And
Mhm.
so let's say that a mom doesn't know this and she is pumping for night feeds, let's say. And then the baby's not getting all of the milk. She's freezing some of it. It's like technically your baby isn't getting a percentage of milk that you're producing that changes in its fats and in its carbohydrates throughout the day. And I
Mhm.
found that really interesting and why and also was fascinating to me. Like some people would pump and they would combine all of their milk together from the whole day, from morning, afternoon, and night. And
Mhm.
there's a reason that it has these different levels to it. So the milk thing is like a whole hole that anyone
No,
can go
yeah.
down.
Yes, I've gone down it just because my passion for everything pregnancy, birth
Mhm.
related, it's like a branch of it that I'm also obsessed with because
Yeah.
breast milk is so incredible and so amazing, and it's so innately designed to be exactly what it needs to be for your baby. And
Mhm.
it breaks my heart to see moms that try everything they can to have a successful journey and they end up not being able to have that. And I don't want to say give up, because if you don't have the support to go on, then it's not you giving up. Like, you did not fail. It's a system that was set up for you to fail.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
lack of support around that is, I don't know, it just really really makes me sad to see that so often.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of women, it's funny that you mentioned not all IBCLCs or lactation consultants, let's say. I don't
Mhm.
know if this woman specifically was, but when I was at the hospital with my first, this lactation consultant came in and she was trying to get me to nurse in positions that she thought I should nurse in. And
Mm.
for whatever reason, my baby and I were most comfortable when she was upright. So it was like
Mhm.
her head was up and down, like she was just up and down, not across. And she kept trying to say, try football, do this, do that. And I think it's probably because of her tie. It just pinched me every other way. So that was the most comfortable.
Mhm.
This lady brought other people in the room. Like I was a circus freak. She was like,
Oh.
come in here. I've never seen anybody nurse in this position before. I'm like, you've never
Oh
seen
my
someone nurse
gosh.
an upright position? This is literally a position.
I
But
try and
that's,
tell him to latch in every way he'll latch. Like, we've done some weird
yeah.
things.
If however baby is gonna latch
Ex-
is how baby is gonna latch. And it's
yeah,
just an example of
exactly.
if I would have had head trash about that or been self-conscious, that could have been something that deterred me from continuing to breastfeed,
Hmm.
And I think that that's something that a lot of consultants or people in the space just, need to consider is how they're approaching moms and how they're approaching the situation
Hmm.
to help and to be supportive because babies are going to do what they're going to do.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, now I don't want to skip over the birth part because that's where we got to. So
Yes.
your doula gets there, she's helping you out. Your midwife gets there. Were you laboring in, you said you were in your tub or you had a birth pool or
So,
both?
well, so whenever my midwives first did their in-home um uh
Like
meeting,
visit. Okay.
yeah, like visit to like look at the house, and um I asked them, I said, "Hey, we have a pretty big bathtub. Would this just work instead of a laboring tub?" And they said, "Yeah, no, we've had moms give birth in their bathtubs all the time. If that's what you would rather do." And I was like, "Sure, let's just do that." So I told them, "We'll just do that." If there is one thing I could change about my birth, it is laboring in that dang tub, because the water was not nearly high enough to where
Mhm.
I don't think I got that. I have people on Instagram ask me often, "How was your experience with a water birth? Would you recommend it?" I don't know, because I did not get any of the benefits that come from birthing in the water, other than for my son being born very peacefully and smoothly and not abruptly, I guess. So the transition was really good for him going into the water. But for me, also having back labor, I would not do that again. The water wasn't
Yeah.
deep enough. So I didn't get that zero gravity effect. I didn't get any of the pain relief from it. The water kept getting cold. I kept getting cold. Um, and then my hands and knees, because it's a hard surface, my hands and
Mhm.
knees were getting very sore because I was laboring on my hands and knees for a good while. I don't really know a timeline of anything. I
Mhm.
just kind of woke up and it was hours later. But I eventually did. I think it was whenever I started feeling the need to push, I leaned back and I got on my back. Well, because I was having strictly back labor, you can see it in some of my home birth videos. I'm holding myself up like this
Mm,
in the bathtub that does not have enough water in it.
mm,
I couldn't figure out for the life of me after I delivered him why my arms and my back were so exhausted. Specifically, my arms and my back were so sore, I could hardly even hold him for the first 3, 4 days. Well, then I went back and looked at my videos after the postpartum high kind of wore off, and I'm like,
mhm.
oh, it's because I was planking.
Yeah, you were using your whole body to hold yourself up, and
Because I
that's
was having
funny.
back labor and I didn't want my back pressing up against the ground, or so it was just I
Mhm.
did not enjoy that. That was not fun. But and then my water did not break until I started pushing.
Mm,
So, and that was another reason why I did not think I was in labor, is
mhm.
because my water never broke. It didn't break
Yeah.
until I pushed maybe once or twice, and then I felt it pop, and then he came very quickly after that. So I pushed, and then as he started to transition, I reached down and I felt him, and I had this moment of just bliss. I will never forget whenever I reached down and I felt his little head. It just, like, I get emotional talking about it because it was like for that one moment where he was still a part of me and he was still inside of me, where he was safe. And that's the one thing I miss about pregnancy, is him being safe, knowing he's safe
Mm.
inside of me. And it was just that last moment of, all right, now you have to come. I'm very sad about it. Now you have to come. And I delivered him, and then my husband picked him up and put him on my chest, and it was beautiful. And then I delivered my placenta, I want to say maybe 15, 20 minutes after. Um, and my placenta was absolutely beautiful. She did
I bet
everything.
with those oysters, I bet she was a good-looking placenta.
She was so pretty, and she did so good for him. She took such good care of him. So
That's amazing. I just love that. The call out on the birth pool slash bathtub. You and I talked about this a little bit
mhm,
previously.
mhm.
I did the same thing with my first baby. I was laboring in my big bathtub thinking, I've got this big bathtub, and it was horrible because it's so hard. And I did not want to be in there. I just wanted to get out.
Mhm.
And
I wanted to get out too, but I was like, we're in too deep.
well, we're having a home birth. I had with my first was going to the hospital. So
Mm.
I didn't even believe that I was in labor either. This is what a clown I was. I'm like, we should call the hospital and ask them. I didn't know what was going on back then. And so, fast forward to the second time, I'm like, I am buying a birth pool. I'm getting a birth pool. Well,
Mhm,
I had a midwife until the end. And when that whole thing dissipated, I
mhm,
decided to buy my own birth pool.
mhm.
And it is night and day different. So next time, get the birth pool.
When I found out that they have like soft sides and a soft floor, and they were big and they had handles, I was like, oh, how did I do that to myself? I put myself through more misery for no reason.
I do think that more midwives should talk about this, home birth midwives that are, attending
Mhm,
births. Mine at the time did, she was like, yes, there are big benefits to this, but I don't think that sometimes the emphasis is there enough. And it really does make a difference, especially the handles.
mhm.
I loved holding onto the handles and like floating back and forth in the water. because like you said, that zero gravity feeling that
Mhm.
comes with being in a deep pool.
Mhm.
So for those listening, get the birth pool. It
Get the
makes the
birth pool.
difference.
Yes. Get it, opt for it. Don't labor in your bath. Don't give birth in your bathtub the way I did. That was no.
If you want a water birth, get the pool. It's worth it.
Mhm.
And you'll find a way from
Yeah.
there forward. But that's so beautiful. I'm so glad that you had a beautiful experience just being home, being safe, being, in your space at home,
Mhm.
not being bombarded with questions and lights and
Oh yeah.
all the other nonsense.
My midwives did absolutely incredible with allowing physiological birth to happen. They were not like, I don't even remember them being in the room. I don't remember. There was never at one point where they were distracting or anything like that. I think they honestly just hung out in the living room until my husband went and said, "Hey, he's about to come," and then they came. Um, I had the
That's a
lights
way to
off.
do it.
Yep, I had the lights off. I had my labor playlist going, which looking back, I should have put way more songs on there because um You're a Good Father played probably 5 times.
Do you
I don't know.
remember what song was playing when he came out? Or did someone catch it on video?
Um, Brody, do you remember? No, I don't. I'm not sure, but I don't know why, but that one just really stuck in my head. It played so many times, and I was like, I'm so sorry to everybody around me.
Hey, maybe that was the one that was playing. You never
Yeah,
know.
it could
My
have been, might be why it's sticking in my head.
It could be. It could be. My sister had a physiological birth for her third baby after, so she had two C-sections and then a natural birth at a birthing center. And
Aw.
she had a playlist going and it did loop like you said. And she asked the same question. She was like, "What song was playing when I gave birth?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I was too busy watching you give birth. I do not remember." But I recorded while she was giving birth and we went back and I turned the volume way up to see whatever song was playing and it was very significant to her. So maybe
Oh,
yours might be significant to you if you have
maybe
any
I'm gonna have to
footage.
look.
um, Water breaking.
Mhm.
Less than 15% of women's water break or less. I think it's like 8 to 15% of women's water breaks before they're in the pushing phase.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that until
I didn't either until just now.
and that's something that I think we all watch these movies or, TV shows like on Friends when, oh,
Yep.
my water broke everywhere. Now I'm in
And
labor. And like, that's what we think.
it's this huge gush, and then the woman's
Yep.
screaming in pain moments later.
Yep. And that's not how it is. My water broke for my first and it trickled with my second and it didn't break with my third until I was
Mhm.
in the pool pushing like you were.
Mhm.
So it can be different
Nothing's
every
an
time.
indicator of labor, and nothing is an indicator of labor except labor itself.
You know what? When the head is coming out, that's the good indicator, right?
That's yes.
Well, I love it. Thank you for sharing your story on birth. I hope that it encourages other women. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. As you're hearing now, this was part one, and there is going to be a part two. We are going to dive into so much more from cloth diapering to being a stay-at-home mom and more. So be sure to tune in next week. In the meantime, you can follow her on Instagram at Haden, Haden Lee, Lee Johnson, or on TikTok at Hayden, Heyden. And as always, thank you for tuning in and for being on this journey with us. If you'd like to follow the Radiant Mission outside the podcast, you can do so on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Today, we are going to close with Jeremiah 17, verses 7 through 8. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. We're wishing you a radiant week, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.